This is Larry Jordan, the host of the Digital Production Buzz. The following interview is an excerpt from a recent program. To hear the entire program, visit digitalproductionbuzz.com. In this segment, we're going to take a look forward toward NAB in Las Vegas. However, we're going to do this a little differently. We've created our own roundtable of experts, starting with Ned Soltz. Ned is an author, an editor, an educator, and consultant on all things related to digital video. He's also a contributing editor for Creative Planet, a moderator on 2Pop and Creative Cow forums, and best of all for us, a regular correspondent here on The Buzz. Hello, Ned. Welcome back.
Hello, Larry, and good to be back.
It's good to see you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today, but just sit there for a second because there's some more people I need to introduce. Next is Philip Hodgetts. And Philip, as we introduced in the last session, is the CEO of Lumberjack Systems and a technologist in his own right. And Philip, good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Next to Philip is Michael Kammes. Michael is the Director of Technology at Keycode Media and consults on the latest in technology and best practices into the digital media communications space. And in his spare time, he's working on a series of web videos called 5 Things, which may be up to 6 maybe by now. We'll find out. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Hello. Good to see you all again.
Good to have you back. But wait, there's one more to kick off our discussion on NAB. No. Oh. To kick off our discussion on NAB, earlier today I asked Randi Altman to share her thoughts on what she was expecting for NAB. Randi?
Well, I think you're going to be seeing a lot about VR, camera rigs, stitching software from shoot to post is going to be big. And in addition to that, I think there'll be a lot of drone stuff going on and maybe some conferences on how not to hit an airplane or hurt people with it. But in addition to that, HDR is going to be big. And what I've been hearing and what I expect to see is that the people that are interested in HDR are sort of going to learn about the different standards and who is attacking which standard with their product. And they're not going to make necessarily any purchases right now because they want to be smart. They want to sit back and figure it out. But they want to learn as much as they can because there are multiple people working on standards for HDR, including those who are looking at it from a production or live broadcast perspective and those that are looking at it from a post-only perspective. So it'll be interesting to see what manufacturers are, which one they're picking, and what workflow they're going to target.
I think those are good comments. Thank you, Randi. Philip, what do you think about Randi's thoughts?
I'd say that she's absolutely spot on with HDR, drones, and virtual reality. These things are going to be the hot topics at this NAB. I think HDR is a very bright spot for NAB. I'm sorry.
That was a horrible pun. A horrible pun.
It's an Aussie pun. we were talking about Aussie puns.
And honestly, if you haven't seen HDR in action, if you haven't seen the high dynamic range screens, the high nit value, the really bright screens, then you should absolutely go out of your way to make sure you see that at this NAB.
Where do we see that? At Best Buy? Or can we see that?
Well, actually, you can. The Vizio make an HDR set.
Okay.
But you'll see a lot, obviously, at the Dolby booth at NAB.
Ned, do you think it's HDR or is it the cameras that are going to have the focus?
Oh, I think HDR is going to have the focus because we already have cameras that are shooting high dynamic range. We have that capability in our editing and coloring software right now. And now the whole question is how do we end up delivering that to the end user? And obviously the end user is going to need an HDR receiver in order to achieve that. And we're going to need HDR monitoring devices in order to take full advantage of being able to edit that to its ultimate advantage. Like, for example, right now we're seeing the new version of the Shogun and Atomos's product that already in their screens already are at least advertised to be an HDR screen. I haven't seen one yet. So I think HDR is the biggest thing.
Go ahead, Mike. Did you see them last night? Did Heather bring it?
She did.
Yeah, she did.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see it? And does it look HDR?
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you think, Michael, I'll come to you in just a second.
Sure.
Ned, do you think there's going to be any camera news at all, or is it going to be pretty much the same old thing and they're going to focus on what the cameras create, which is the HDR signal?
Well, I think we're probably going to see some cameras, but we've already seen announcements, for example, in Panasonic with the VeriCam LT. Sony already told us at our pre-NAB press conference not to expect a replacement for the FS5 or FS7 or F5 or F55, but rather to see firmware updates. I don't know what JVC is going to come up with, but I think we're going to see less in terms of radical new camera introduction than we are going to see the technology kind of catching up to what those cameras are able to do.
Michael, what do you think?
Well, I'd agree with the majority of that. I think what the very interesting portion is going to be is high dynamic range. It's a very esoteric term, right? What defines high? Right? So for camera manufacturers to say, hey, this is going to be high dynamic range, well, what defines high and whose definition of high? All the different manufacturers, camera manufacturers
Now,
have different standards.
My understanding is that high dynamic range is defined as 10-bit video, and where you've got more than 256 shades of gray or more than 1,000 colors. Is there another definition of high dynamic range?
Well, sure. Obviously, that's bit depth, right? But we're still talking about luminance values. And when we talk about how to view HDR, we're talking about nit count, right? And traditional televisions are a lower nit count, around 100 or so. Newer consumer televisions are upwards of 1,000. And I say upwards because they vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. So now we're stuck with getting cameras that can capture HDR, again, what range that is, and then being able to replicate that during distribution. So it's the wild, wild west.
Philip?
Yes, that's pretty much the way I see it, except it's not just high dynamic range, it's also a high very wide color space, a wide gamut of color. So we have a completely different way of looking at an image. Instead of our brightest whites being at the highest level of the 256 scale range or 1024 or better, we might set just normal white at 2/3 of the way up so that we've got room to go up and get that glint off the window or glint off the gun.
Emphasizing speculars.
Yeah, so that you actually have somewhere for the specular to actually hit you in the eye with extra brightness.
I'm kind of confused here. Is there no definition here? Is there no standards
well,
here?
unfortunately, the great thing about
what are we talking about?
The terrific thing is about standards is there are so many of them. Dolby have the Dolby Vision is probably the most well known, and that's a full workflow from basically the acquisition stage through grading through delivery.
There's no SMPTE standards? There's a Dolby standard?
There's sort of no. There's not at the moment. The BBC have another way of
SMPTE has a standard. Dolby Vision has a standard. BBC has a standard. So there's at least three standards that I know of for HDR that are all defining it differently.
Which is kind of an oxymoron. 3 standards.
Yeah, 3 standards.
But we've been through this many times.
Yes.
That's going to be the difficulty in the production of the consumer sets, because really until there is some kind of standard, we're going back to the old VHS Betamax wars until something ultimately emerges as a standard.
Are there any HDR monitors to actually look at?
That's exactly the point I was going to bring up.
And that's the expensive issue, is that the tail's wagging the dog. Because as Philip pointed out, you can go to your local consumer box store and buy a monitor that does, I don't want to use air quotes, but HDR. But if you try to view it in a critical viewing environment, in your edit bay, in your finishing bay, the monitors are very expensive and very temperamental, if you can get them. If you can
who
get
said
them.
that? There's like 2 monitors in all of Los Angeles, and one's at Warner Brothers?
Yeah.
There is a consumer standard called Premium HD, or Premium UHD, which is the wide color gamut HDR signal 4K, which is now a brand which has been licensed to multiple
But what's the
consumer
nit value
set-tops.
on that?
Pardon?
What's the nit value on that?
But what I'm saying is there's that name which defines it from a consumer point of view. But you're right. So far, we don't have any good HDR monitors that we can use in post.
We don't have any, period.
Well, there
because
is.
Dolby have a couple of monitors, but you can't buy those monitors. You can only go to a facility that has one of the monitors.
That's what I think we're going to see at NAB. I think we're going to see some HDR monitors.
Panasonic and Sony have them both on the roadmap. It's just whether they're going to release them and whether you have to give up your firstborn. Although I love Trevor, you may have to give him up in order to get one of those monitors.
You're going to have to give up multiple generations of firstborn, actually.
Until the 7th generation.
Let's shift gears out of HDR. Is there something else that's caught your eye, Ned, that we should pay attention to at NAB?
Say for VR,
I think we should
say
pay
it.
attention to VR. I think we should pay attention to VR.
Good, it'll be at the
particularly
Super
now with this Nokia device that everybody seems to be touting. We'll probably see GoPro's entry that they've been touting, and we're seeing more and more deliverables and software going along with it. So I think VR is going to be the next big kind of subtopic, and I see that as ultimately having more traction than 3D, which I didn't believe when it came out a few years ago, and I can now sit back and say I told you so. but I think VR is not 3D. That's here to stay.
All right. Well, let's shift over to Michael, because Michael, you made a good point that VR is actually a whole lot of different things. So what is it?
Well, just like HDR, there are three different areas it falls into, right? You have the acquisition of VR 360, you have the editorial or post-production process of VR and 360, and then you have the exhibition, the consuming. And we're going to see developments in each one of those areas. Yeah. We're going to see cameras. We saw also a couple weeks ago over at Alpha Dogs, right? We saw the Jount camera, which is doing the stitching on the fly.
24 lenses.
Yeah, doing the stitching on the fly. And I think we're also going to see, for all you Mac heads out there, the ability to actually do VR in post on the Mac. It's traditionally been PC for stitching, but we're now seeing the emergence of some software that can do it on the Mac side.
Well, you have Tim Dashwood's plugin, which does it on Final Cut Pro 10 and Premiere. And then you have Metal, which also does it After Effects. Then there's Nuke. And so everything is but you need some heavy iron. And unfortunately, the Macs are not considered heavy iron.
Well, it's not only just 360 and every direction, it's also high frame rate. I mean, I believe that the minimum standard is going to be 60 frames per second, and a lot of the device manufacturers are approving like 75 and 80. It's only above 72, 75 frames per second that we lose the perception of flicker. At that point, it starts to look solid and real to us. So we really do need to have high frame rate in there. But again, who's going to use this? I mean, I don't see the traditional Hollywood market or television going to VR, at least in the next couple of years.
So what do you think the market is?
Games, absolutely.
Well, games, obviously.
Experiences.
That's CGI, though.
Games and experience, yeah.
I think if we look at museums, I think we look at those kind of one-on-one engagements where you want to immerse yourself completely. I think it's very difficult. I think over at HPA this year, there was someone was talking about VR, and they said, I haven't seen a good story, I've seen good concepts.
That's what we're going to do.
That was a great way
But that's
of
what we're
phrasing
going to explore at the Super Meet. How to tell, or can you tell, a compelling story in VR and 360? We think you can, but nobody's cracked it yet. That's what's so much fun about the world right now, is that there are no rules. I mean, we are now just sort of making up the own rules. And so if somebody finds that rule, and if they're working on it right now, Doug Liman, who's one of the great directors, is going to be doing a Netflix series in VR. Mm-hmm. So it is a cinematic 360 series. So you're going to be telling a story in this stuff. So maybe he'll crack it. I don't know, or maybe not.
So are drones now invisible? Are drones going to have?
Drones will be huge. I mean, it's such a flexible platform. There are so many ways that they can be used.
You know what? I don't even think you're going to need the nets anymore, because now they have those little sensors that it's not going to hit people and it's not going to hit each other and all that kind of stuff.
Back in 2012, I was doing a show that it required me to learn to fly a drone, and I just saw on the company's board their roadmap for software, and I thought, why am I spending 45 minutes a day learning how to fly this, doing strange things in your head as to what's forward and backwards, what's around? The software is going to do it all within a couple of years.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what's happened.
Ned, what's your thought on drones?
The laws have to be worked out, and they have to be consistent. So, for example, sitting here right over the GW Bridge from New York City and Bergen County, we can't fly a drone anywhere in Bergen County. You virtually can't fly a drone anywhere in New York City. So I'd have to go way out to the country to do it. So the restrictive laws are certainly going to have to be dealt with for this to be totally viable.
But here in L.A., we're getting almost daily drones that are buzzing planes at LAX and causing mid-air disasters. And I think that there has to be a balance between being allowed to fly a drone anywhere and hoping that you get on a plane and get back off again, isn't there?
Of course, of course. That's the problem. It accelerated too rapidly into too easily a consumer accessible device, and so the idiots take over.
So, Michael, it's if we don't think HDR, and we don't think VR, and we don't think drones, what should we look for at NAB?
There's two things, and neither of them are sexy. I'm sorry, but one of them is asset management. Exactly. It's up there with Codex, right, Mike?
Yeah.
But I like to
Get a close up of this.
I like to refer to as automation, because good asset management isn't just tracking media and being able to retrieve it and find it when you need it, but also those automated tasks, whether it be transcoding, FTPing, sending emails. Let's spend your time creating as opposed to media managing.
Okay.
Right?
So media management. What's another one?
The one is security. Right, there have been a lot of high-level hacks at studios, but also, unscripted reality shows. Right, having their systems hacked into, or having dailies lost, and there's still the old, well, give the hard drive to a PA and fly him to where he's going, so no one gets that footage. So being able to encrypt that footage, being able to encrypt that footage so no one else can get it is a huge issue.
Okay, Philip, what are your top hits that we haven't covered yet?
Michael has all the sexy topics, so I'll have to go. I'll have to go to augmented reality, which is quite different from VR, which is where you go into another space. Well, augmented reality is where that other space comes into the real world. So you look at a scene through a camera lens, usually on a phone, a smartphone of some kind, and extra information is overlaid onto that image. So it might be you can do geolocated run, so you have to go to a certain point and then find the bug or the Easter egg.
What did Microsoft have? The Hollow. That demo was fantastic.
They're dealing with Civil War battlefields where you can watch on an iPad and see the actual battle.
You go up to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, Las Vegas, not Paris, Texas, and they give you an iPad, and anywhere on the top of the Paris Tower, you can look and see the view from the real Eiffel Tower. Look up, look down, look around.
Cool. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Michael, what's your take for NAB? What have we not talked about that you want to mention quickly?
No, he just brought it up, augmented reality, which we hadn't talked about. So other than that, I have nothing to say, Larry. I'm sorry.
Ned, quickly, what's your quick take? What have we not mentioned that we need to talk about quick?
Well, we haven't talked about lighting, and I think we're seeing tremendous advances in lighting over the past few years, and I hope we'll see that continual development to this year at NAB with high CRIs, with plasma, with remote phosphor. I think there are a lot of advances in lighting technology.
So LEDs will have the full spectrum of the light this year, or is it going to be 5 years from now?
At Felix, a light like Felix, for example, you've got a full spectrum. You don't have any green spikes. You've got a very high quality LED. If you look at the remote phosphor lights, like from BBS or from Cineo, you're seeing a very even light with a full spectrum. And I think we'll see some announcements at NAB in that regard as well.
Ned, I want to thank you so much. Ned Soltz is the contributing editor for Creative Planet Networks. His website is creativeplanetnetwork.com. Ned, as always, a delight chatting with you. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ned.
Director of Technology for Keycode Media at keycodemedia.com. Philip Hodgetts, CEO of Intelligent Assistants. And Philip, it's at philiphodgetts.com, among other places. And Mike, you don't get to leave. We're going to talk with Serena Catania right after this.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. To stay connected and receive updates from The Buzz, sign up for our free weekly newsletter now. Or you can learn more about us on our website. And thanks for watching The Digital Production Buzz.